now that we're ready to reassemble the carburetors back onto the engine, first we want to pull out our paper towels. Then we want to move our lines out of the way. And work our idle speed down through. The throttle cable assembly with the barrels is probably the most difficult portion of this. We want to filter our first line down through and our second line, getting them roughly in place of where they're supposed to go. Then we need to take the entire carb assembly, flip it up, and we can easily work our barrel connectors in. We want to go ahead and do the same thing with the carburetor. So right now it's a lot easier to get this installed. As you can see, to get the connector in, you push over for the choke and then it goes right in. Very simple. So now we're going to line these with our intake points. Typically what I find best is to set the back end, the lowest point in first, and then rock in the top. Now we're going to want to put our tube back on for our gas supply. We're also going to want to install our tube up at the top. Now we want to take our Phillips screwdriver and tighten down the clamps. We're now ready to reassemble our throttle cables. The one without the plastic piece goes in first, and that cable is actually going to go down inside of it. And then the next piece is the plastic one. And you can actually see there's a groove here, and that goes around that part there. So you simply take it, twist it sideways, and that's how it's going to be. Now the cables are taut right now because all the slack is down there, but that's how it's going to reassemble. Wrap the bottom one around, put the barrel connector in. The cable rides on the nylon. Next one is the same thing. Put the barrel connector in, twist the cable. See, the cable's fully seated. there's a nub right here. There's a corresponding hole on the back side of handlebar. Whenever you're done, your throttle should quickly pop back. If it is slow, then make sure that your grip is not rubbing and all your cables are correct. Go ahead and lube your cables. It's actually a really good time to lube your cables since everything is apart. Now we need to reassemble the brake. And on this, there's an up. All your switches are still working, your brake lever still works, and your throttle still responds properly. Make sure that your O-rings are still firmly seated inside the grooves. And then we're ready to install our trumpets. Now on our trumpets, they should be facing upwards. You can actually have it the wrong way if you force it, and they'll be pointing down or out. These are just 8mm bolts. Now is a really good time to replace your fuel filter. You can get these online. Your idle adjust cable, it hooks into this. Just pop it in and that's it. So we are now ready to reassemble the airbox. Remember, very important that we reconnect the tube to the bottom of the airbox. That should be the first thing that we connect is that tube. Once we have the tube connected, we want to squeeze the spring connector together and work it up the tube. This next part is probably one of the more difficult jobs, but what you have is you have the actual air intake tubes right here. So we've got one on the left side of the bike and one on the right side of the bike. And there are rubber ram air tubes that come from the very front. And you have to get the rubber ram air tubes inside the plastic to ensure you have proper airflow into the airbox. The best way that I've found to do this is to slowly work the whole system down into place, getting it relatively close to where you want it. Then, with a long screwdriver, you're actually going to be putting the screwdriver in, on top of, and around the rubber, and working the screwdriver around, and it pulls the rubber into the plastic. Now you can see right here that that side is fully seated. Now we have to work the other side in, and whenever we do it, you have to make sure that you don't pull the left side out. Now that we're done with the front of the airbox, we will want to work the back into place. Take our oil catch can, put it down inside the engine compartment. Now we have our two 10mm bolts. Whenever you put these in, you want to make sure that you do not squish the rubber trumpets. Move those out of the way. Make sure that you replace the rubber boots that went into the back. If you don't replace these, then the bike will actually run odd because it's pulling air from back here instead of through the airbox itself. Now we drop in our air filter. We also take our screen for large debris. On the top of the airbox, you will see that we have a groove. This groove is where the screen sits. It's important that you get your screen in there. The easiest way to do that is to line it up on one side, and as you let it down, as long as you let it down gently, it should automatically line itself up. Now we take our 10 millimeters, tighten the bolts up. Front of the airbox, we're going to want to slide our tube in. Okay, we now want to reinstall our breather tube. Okay, we're now ready to reinstall our gas tank. Whenever we do this, let's pull up our gas supply line, lay it to the side. Let's also pull up our gas gauge line, pull it to the side, and make sure that our overflow tube is tucked into the battery compartment so that we don't have anything down here that we're going to squash. Once you get the tank basically into place, you can gently pull on the plastics and tilt it back, and then you have very easy access to your connector for the gas gauge. Simply connect it up and lay it back in there. Now we want to put the 12 millimeter bolt into the back of the gas tank. Don't not tighten it all the way down. The reason that you don't want to tighten it all the way down is because up here we're going to be putting in our two 8 millimeter bolts. And we want to make sure that we can still move the tank around in order to get the bolts. Come back and tighten up our rear bolt. First, make sure your clamp is turned the right direction so it's easy to slide on. Now put the nub into the grommet and it snaps into place. Now we take our Phillips screwdriver and our two Phillips screws and connect the body panels to the tank. Take our overflow tube, connect it to the tank. We're going to install our bolt here on our panel. Make sure that you have the plastic washer in. We're now ready to reinstall our seat. The front hooks on with this and the rear hooks on with these pieces here. Okay, we're now ready to start the motorcycle for the first time. Make sure that you engage the choke. It's been a long time since it's been run in my instance. Turn the bike on. Make sure that you're in run.
Mm-hmm.